Space Sims, or simply you and your trusty spaceship farting in space and doing things together like a happily married couple. Until one of you springs a leak and blows up. This space game subgenre has advanced tremendously in the last 10 years and hosts some really immersive and mechanically deep games. But then why is it always you four that everyone keeps talking about and playing? Well, the answer is simple. These four are not only very similar to each other, but also the largest and most complete games with biggest variety of gameplay. From basic space pew-pews, to simple trading and cargo hauling, space mining and beautiful asteroid rings, to peaceful exploration among the stars, or up close and personal, and way more. Now, each one of these four games has a particular focal point they outmatch others in, and yet they still manage to implement most of what the other ones have, crafting these really interesting and varied worlds and universes where you really can be who you want and do what you want. A space pirate, explorer, trader, ship admirer, racer, or a little bit of everything. If nothing else, Space Sims are truly starting to feel like Second Life type games. Well, mostly without the ship. So then, X4, Foundation, Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, and No Man's Sky. Four games that best represent of what a true space sim could, and maybe even should be. Like all the other years, I'm gonna take a look back at the last 12 months for each one. Updates, changes, and other news, including a comparison for good measure. In fact, I covered smaller space games already in a similar fashion, so feel free to check that roundup here. But today I'll be covering the big three, plus X4. Well, okay, fine, it's big four. So, and actually speaking of that, let's give the Germans the first go today. Celebrating 25 years since the first X-series game released, X4 has managed to come a long way. The trading-focused space sim of today's bunch is a rather janky, cumbersome, yet depthful, trading game, with spaceship wallpaper plastered on it. You know, it's kinda funny, I still can't get over the Microsoft Excel looking UI filled with my worst enemy. The letters and words that some people tell me actually have a meaning. However, once I started looking into the spaceship section, I realized X4 might just have one of the prettiest spaceships around. I said one of! Calm down, Star Citizen fanboys! So, when it comes to the gameplay, I realized that the beautiful parts really get lost in the sea of unappealing but highly functional UI, and that's kinda where the game is. The constant need to check spreadsheets with deep mechanical features, most namely the background simulation for markets, makes you forget just how pretty the game can look. Now, over the years, since its release in 2018, X4 has been slowly, steadily inching forward without a particular big boom in popularity. However, it is one of the fair few single-player games that has the positives of live service games, meaning the constant updates and additions, but without the bullshit like the always online or server dependency. I guess then no wonder when on Steam charts you can see the game only increasing in player counts. It truly is an exception, and a great one at that. And then again, why wouldn't it be? For what it does, the space trading, it is the best of them all. And guess what? What a surprise! A lot of space dads also like trading and the cathartic building. Hell, even I enjoy it sometimes. As for the other two types of gameplays that become core parts of every self-respecting space sim, exploration and combat, well, exploration, yes, it's rather interesting in case of X4. While there is no particular planet scanning or data gathering, exploration in X4 comes down to basically early game uncovering of the player space. You can think of it like a Skyrim or Fallout map marker revealing. Once you uncover the whole map, or order a fleet of NPCs to systematically scout out each sector, that kinda is it for exploration. Unless of course you count story-based events in the last few expansions. But as for the combat, the best I can give you is, it exists. While my personal grievance with the control scheme or needlessly overcomplicated button combo mode switches and mechanic engagement is a big one, combat overall is passable by casual standards, I guess. Hell, it is more interesting than Starfield at least. Gods, look at our collective standards and how far they have dropped thanks to Bethesda these days. Jesus. Seriously though, there is one thing that I personally find really cool in any kind of space sim to have, and X4 has stealing ships. Though again, it's done through the menus like there's no tomorrow. Still, once more, this German space sim has implemented a few golden nuggets that I think should not be overlooked. But how's the game today? Well, like I mentioned before, unlike most single-player games, player base of X4 has inched only upwards, which is such a cool thing to see. See, we don't need games as a service, we don't need a goddamn server connection, just content and updates once in a while. This year I already covered the success of X4, which you can find the link for on the top right on the YouTube cards. During making of this piece, I did contact developers and inquired about a few things, one of which was the employee count of the company. And apparently they're grown to around 50 heads, which might not sound like such a big number. However, apparently in 2022, Hello Games was about the same size. And similarly to No Man's Sky, X4 is developing its own game engine to run the game on, which has both positives and negatives. In fact, if you take a look at the render dock and the rendering pipeline, you'll see that the game is lacking quite a bit of even basic occlusion culling. However, developers do remark that there's a much bigger performance hit, especially in mid to late game, generated by the background calculations, or markets, or ships and travel and more. Basically, CPU bottlenecking is still a thing today. So with every update they try to squash that more than the graphics pipeline. On a simpler scale, bugs are still part of the game. Hell, the first thing I do in every fresh playthrough is get on the main ring road, whatever the fuck it's called, and course around and spam discovery pulse as I get flown around the space autobahn. Every time you switch sectors, the pulse effect borks out. I mean, come on guys, I know this is just a visual thing, it's still funny to see that this bug from the launch still exists. But okay, what about the new stuff this year? Well, Egosoft are simple devs. Every year, new expansion gets released, along with a new base game version and a few content pieces and mechanics for everyone. This year, it's Timelines expansion and 7.0 base game update. With the Timelines expansion, unlike all the other DLCs, the game offers a selection of scenarios to recreate moments from the previous games, as well as a few challenges. Funnily enough, that actually includes racing as well, a bizarre rarity in space sim games, despite its rather simple implementation. Through completing these scenarios, you unlock a new ship for the universe game mode, and that kinda pissed off people. See, Timelines was not well received, and to date it still sits about 40% on the Steam. When inquired about the low reception, the developers estimated that it was because of the uniqueness among other DLCs. As for the base game, with the 7.0 you get a few extra locations, accessibility features, visual redesign for a few ships, playable Xeno ships for the very first time, and a few more technical things. But as we are looking forward in the future, well, now that the Timelines expansion is out, I inquired developers for the future plans, and maybe X5 even? Well, fear not, as Egosoft are still focusing on X4 and more content deliveries for the foreseeable future. Apparently, approximately they're 70% done with the X4, but that's just an estimate. Overall, if things are working out, and they likely will, next year, as with years before, we'll see yet another expansion, like before, and the base game update as well. Apparently, some work is being done to UI, but yeah, we'll see how that goes, okay? Overall, X4, while janky and not particularly easy to approach for casual audiences, still has plenty of greatness if given a chance. It is a trading space sim, and these Germans certainly have set the bar rather high for it. And now for some Star Citizen. But you know what, for a change of pace, I'll give it to somebody who's been keeping up with it a bit more than I have. Take it away, Dig!
Every game that you've ever played, when you started it, it was fresh, it was new and exciting. If it was a really good experience, it brought something new to the table, a new way of playing a familiar genre, a level of visual fidelity far beyond the previous versions, a unique subgenre of a game type. After a while though, you start to notice the seams, the hidden restrictions of what's possible. What looked like fully traversable terrain was limited to boundaries defined by crumbling buildings and debris. What looked like damage models on a ship were actually just preset changes to the textures, or what at first first felt like epic space trucking loops turned out to be just moving from location to location while numbers on the ledger changed with no visual or physical indication of it. Star Citizen is the game that picks up the slack there and stretches out the limiting factors of game development. A space/everything sim with no physical boundaries, no hidden loading screens, and everything is physicalized, visualized, and definitely sensationalized. Want to make a living as a blue-collar worker? Grab your least worn-out flannel shirt and lunch pail and go solo on a mining ship, mining ground vehicle, or mine by hand. Or join the crew and man a mining turret, or be the mining ship engineer, or captain a ship that has enough room to carry empty mining saddlebags to swap out for their full ones so you can carry their mined ore to a refinery and then later to the marketplace where refined mined commodities are traded. That's several ways to approach just being a miner or mining adjacent. Or you can get into salvaging or trading, hauling, ship combat, ground combat, small and big game hunting, racing, medical play, refueling, small deliveries, in-game server-wide events, and several other things that's hard to remember all at once. And then there's the little things like being able to EVA or getting your Ripley on and hopping in a powered cargo loader, carving trenches into the water with the wake from your engines, looking at the individual pixels on a giant screen, putting a vehicle inside a ship, flying out of a gas giant, wiping off your wet helmet faceplates, plus countless other details. All these things combine to blow away the industry-wide tech debt that the gaming industry has been accumulating as each IP became just a slightly better version of the last one in the genre. And that's where Star Citizen excels, busting through the seams, through the traditional boundaries that have held gaming back through the decades. In the spirit of delivering on this, the past 12 months have been busy as the development wheels have been picking up speed. Too many things to name them all, but they've leveled up the character creator to something beautiful now. New locations like distribution centers and derelict settlements have popped up in the verse. Several gameplay components like salvaging, heist missions and events, cargo hauling missions, which is different from trading, tractor beams on ships. Wildlife is now flying and running across the planets. A complete rework of the HUD and ship control panels, the new local and star map system. EVA has been reworked. Freight elevators in your hangars and the hangars themselves have become player-owned areas that, besides now having a ship elevator in it, you can place all your furniture and everything else you own wherever you own in it, and it'll always persist. Then you got some new tech that's come in, like the Vulkan renderer, image upscaling, replication layer split, all the way up to right now where we've been testing server meshing, which
109 people are on the server right now. It's not even, it's 9 people over what a regular server is, and it's hardly working. People are just kind of, yeah, the performance is terrible. We couldn't run an Orison. Elevators aren't working in the... And I'm gonna get shit for saying that this is still not that good. I mean, I know it.
once fully implemented, will unlock some really interesting things like moving the player cap to well beyond the current 100-some players, as well as improve the server load distribution and performance. And of course, there's been about 18 ships and vehicles that have dropped in the past year. It's not all beaches and wine spritzers though. The addition of so many new things and modifications to old things has had its growing pains. Master modes, which is an adjustment to flight systems meant to slow down the high-speed jousting combat into closer dogfighting quarters, has been a somewhat divisive addition. Shields and weapons being reserved for the slower speed modes and stripped away from the higher speed navigation mode is bound to cause an outcry from some of the player base.
There are issues with the current state of the game that I'm going to block out for you folks, and it wasn't until this message here posted by YogiClot on Spectrum where I felt it was necessary for me to put my best foot forward to try and explain what is actually happening and then what is being said on Spectrum. I feel like there is either a massive amount of miscommunication going on, or there is a simply large hole of knowledge that is simply not being crossed.
But just like with every single thing implemented, folks will get used to it as it's refined. And as cool as unstructured game loops like salvage and trading are, the game has for years been lacking in diversity amongst structured missions. They've grown lately with the addition of the giant distribution centers that could at any time house several different players engaged in several different missions in several different locations within the interior and exterior. The introduction of animals has done the obvious and produced hunting missions, but there's still a need for more things to fill out the contracts manager because they're essential for new players to find their footing, a welcome break from the other loops, and a focal point for groups of players to take on structured challenges. Currently, the missions are being reworked on the back end for compatibility with the imminent server meshing tech, which points at why more missions haven't been deposited in the game so far. They would have just created more work that has to be redone on the other end. The outlook for the near future is looking sexy. Static server meshing will be moved from testing into the live environment, which will increase the collision of players as we move from shards with 100 players to 1,000 players per shard. Another big player-facing product of server meshing is the brand new star system of Pyro. Throughout Star Citizen's development, we've all been crammed into a single star system named Stanton. Before the end of the year, one of the jump gates in Stanton will come alive and allow us to navigate through a wormhole, trying our best not to take damage or fall out of it, then arrive in Pyro, which is a lawless star system run by the local gangs, which is in heavy contrast to the relative safety of Stanton that's policed and governed by various corporations and the United Earth Empire. Typically, it's par for the course for space games to have several star systems to travel to, but in this case, one is seamless travel back and forth. You actually do the piloting through the wormhole that has its own physical laws, which if violated can leave you lost in space or even severely crippled. Two, rather than the Pyro system being a variation on the theme like other games, different skybox, same everything else, Star Citizen's new solar system is a completely different animal. You would think when you're going for a more realistic aesthetic, how many different ways can planets or moons actually look? Turns out it's a lot. Besides all the new planets and moons and everything else needed to fill out the system like massive space stations, colony outposts, asteroid bases, you got the consequences of Pyro being over twice as large as Stanton, which means the scarcity of fuel and necessity of resource management. Pyro is a dying star, so you have the danger of getting hit with unpredictable solar flares that move faster than you can quantum travel, so you can't outrun them, which I can tell you is definitely scary when your ship turns off, especially in atmosphere, because you're essentially getting slapped with a giant EMP. We'll also soon be seeing fire make its debut, a sexy but dangerous thing you'll have to deal with via new features like fire extinguishers and the life support system. You can shut off in individual rooms to smother a fire, but can also smother you if you don't have the resources to keep it running. This is governed by ship engineering, which will make its way from the separate Arena Commander module into the live environment. Being able to finally be Scotty or Geordie LaForge and keep the ship running and tune it up for the situation isn't everybody's cup of Earl Grey, but there's a lot of us that can't wait to man the stations, diverting power and running around replacing fuses and fixing ship components. Naturally, some folks just want to hop in a game that's already grown and developed as much as it's ever going to and do their thing for about 45 minutes to an hour before logging off. Wham bam, thank you, Commander. Those folks probably ain't gonna want to dip their toes in the verse, and I get it. Star Citizen is for the insane. It's time demanding and sometimes it's been rough and long in the making, but it's a beautiful struggle with some very rewarding experiences now and down the road.
Next up, Elite Dangerous, a game that I myself deem as the best space sim to date, even in spite of the most recent changes or the fact that it's far from the title of great in my book. Speaking of original Elite from '84, the game that properly kicked off the true space sim category with combat, trading and open world, this year is celebrating 40 years. So let's raise our collective space dad glasses for the progenitor of this immersive genre of space, GTAs. Anyways, ever since the 2014 release 10 years ago, Elite Dangerous has delighted even the casual genre outsider like myself with unparalleled immersion. A truly unique experience that deserves the full definition of the word immersive, not a game journal bloggerist immersive. Even today, this otherworldly experience of piloting a spaceship is rather magical. Having menus in real game space, like what Dead Space did, only helps to create this unique feeling of controlling a machine and not a bunch of menus. You know, X4. And you know, it's kind of funny that the game, even though has very simplistic VR implementation that hasn't been majorly updated since the very first time it was implemented, the game design fits so well to the seated experience, well, mostly because it is, that it even competes with real VR games. And say it with me, further immerses you into the game. Elite is not bogged down by disruptive menus, the frame rate is stable, the gameplay is, well, actual gameplay, and most of all, controls are not ass backwards. See, the reason I regard Elite Dangerous as the best space sim is rather simple. It doesn't have stupid controls that flight sims and space sims quite often struggle with, especially in the past. Sure, it is complex, but not complicated. It offers finished and playable game with intersecting game loops, even if critically I have big problems with at least some of it. And more than anything, the game goes beyond just being a game. It offers some really forward-looking design in places that actually matter. Most notably, of course, those in-game space, menus, and basic flight mechanics that offer freedom of flight, without going full Newtonian physics or hammering the speed so hard that it's bumper cars. And yes, I'm looking at you, Star Citizen Master Modes now. Now, as for the gameplay, well, aside from being the most immersive of today's quartet, Elite Dangerous, being a fully fledged spacey, shippy, flying game, hosts all the typical Space Sim core gameplay types. Trading, while it's not fully dynamic like, let's say, X4, it's very decent and exactly what you expect. You have some stuff, and that stuff has price. Every station has different prices for that stuff, so you can make money by exploiting starving people, or by selling people. Yay! Now, as for the combat, well, this is where you're gonna be either in the Camp Star Citizen or Camp Elite Dangerous. See, Elite's approach to combat is somewhat more basic, yet it's fully realized and for the most part balanced. Well, at least when it comes to the ship maneuvering mechanics, which Star Citizen's Master Modes is fucking up so hard in. As for the damage model, weapon damage types, resistances, module damage, and all the other properties that go into the simple pew-pewing, when stacked together creates a rather complex picture. But again, it's not overcomplicated. Here though, Elite is suffering from balancing problems and power creep almost entirely thanks to engineering. But to make the story short, until Star Citizen gets its act together, it looks like Elite Dangerous flight system and combat mechanics are going to remain undisputed, yet with major problems still. And as for exploration, well, Elite Dangerous definitely has the best space-based exploration mechanics. Honking the system, then scanning the planets from afar, and then getting up close to launch probes for full detail and payout. It's really nice. Though when it comes to planet-side based exploration, yeah, it's pretty barren, and not in the way that, well, the space is supposed to be barren too, you know. No real tools to search while you're flying or even on foot beyond just, pixel spotting with your eye holes, and hoping that what you spot is something interesting. Very few mechanics that make it frankly a rather missed opportunity more than anything. So where does then Elite stand? What's its strong point? Well, I'd say it's the experience of flying the spaceship itself, that immersion as I alluded before, and of course, combat. But all the other types of gameplay are very close as well. Hell, mining as part of trading gameplay is very nice, but I would say Star Citizen is better. Well, that is when it works above 60 frames a second, which is nearly never. Alright, with all the positivity spewing from the cynical Latvian who criticized and questioned every goddamn decision developers and the company have done with the game, there must be a catch. How is the game today? Well, kinda good as well. Right around May 2024, after about 5-year-long pause, the game finally received new ships, which is a cheap, easy, and guaranteed crowd pleaser. Also, a recent improvement in material drops necessary for engineering upgrades have been released and received rather well, though the grumpy TheYamiks has a thing or two to say about it, mainly that it solves absolutely nothing and yet is another lazy band-aid over Landmine's wound that is the whole goddamn system of engineering. But okay, it's a good thing, even if a mild one. Oh, and as of writing, the delayed key feature rework from 2023, namely Power Play 2, from what has been told, and I repeat, not shown or explained even, just told to us, is sounding more like a minor change than a real overhaul, but again, we'll see.
So not at launch. It is something that we will be monitoring after Power Play has gone live, but it's not something that will be...
Also, the aliens, known as Targoids, revealed their motherships, called Titans, and this year players got to attack and even destroy them to a point that only 2 out of 8 are still left. With extra Targoid activities taking place, it too seems to be mostly positive and great time for commanders at large. So, all things considered, it sounds like the game once more is being active after the Odyssey expansion dropped and bombed so hard it almost killed the game. Well, when it comes to Odyssey, it certainly did kill something, and that was the console version of the game for sure. Yes, I see you there, my console peasant brothers and sisters, but killing console version's development really was the only correct choice Frontier had, as sad as it is. Now, what really is the saddest part for me, and yes, this is where the other shoe drops for Elite, is how it decided to rejuvenate itself. Through pay-to-win and FOMO, like there is no tomorrow. So, let's unpack this, since I can already hear the literal idiots in the crowd yelling, "Well, what are you winning in Elite? There is no winning, so how is that pay-to-win, bro?" Right then, so Frontier decided to start selling ship packages, just like Star Citizen if you will. You put down a few bucks and boom, you get a ship with no rebuy cost for it or equipped parts within the bundle it's sold with, and maybe a few engineered parts as well as some cosmetics. Sounds like a deal, doesn't it? Additionally, every new ship that from now on would come to Elite Dangerous would be released with paid early access, meaning that yes, the ship will be available for everyone playing Odyssey version, but 3 months later. Until then, you either buy one of those ship packages and unlock it right away, or wait. So then, fear of missing out, or FOMO. In marketing, it's a tactic of, hey, you want to get it now, right? You better pay up. Or, hey, you better buy it now, or you'll miss it completely. It will run out of stock or something. You know, that disgusting practice. Frontier has used this before, and many companies still do. I mean, remember, pre-orders for games are, well, basically that.
Make your own choice and embrace what you've become. Augment your pre-order.
FOMO marketing is a manipulative tactic to manipulate and push the customer who is maybe on the verge of a purchase to make that purchase. Sure, there are greater or smaller cases of it, and it's still not illegal in most instances, but it's still a very scummy thing. Personally, I'd rather have fair marketing than abusive tactics, but you know, that's just me. I just want my favorite games not to be complete assholes to me as a customer. The biggest problem, however, arises with pay to win. I've heard all the excuses these so-called fans of the game make, most notably, but there's no winning in Elite Dangerous, how's that pay to win? And to that, I really have to say, don't ask questions you don't want an answer to. Tell me, are you not getting a ship immediately when you purchase these packages? Is that not an advantage? Even a little bit? Is the no insurance cost for these ships that you purchase for money not some kind of an advantage? Sure, Elite Dangerous doesn't have a win state, but pay to win does not refer to just a win screen. You do realize that, don't you? Being able to get something faster than by normally playing through the use of your credit card. Does that not sound unfair, unbalanced, and most of all, scummy? Even a little bit. I mean, let's be frank here. We all, as gamers, uniformly hate pay to win because we all know what a scummy thing it is when someone can just wave their wallet around and get the same stuff you'd normally have to grind for. And of course, then the defenders are saying, well, but those ship packages contain shitty builds. Those ships are trash, so it's not pay to win, it's pay to lose, so what's the harm? Yeah, so what? It's still pay to win. Sure, it's a bad deal in gameplay wise, but you're still getting an advantage. You're still getting that ship, and you're getting that zero insurance cost, don't you? You do realize that the fact that this kind of pay to win that affects the game less only makes it easier to ignore and dismiss? Oh, it's not that bad. Already proves that you've been manipulated. It is easier to ignore these bad things when they're not that obvious, now is it? And you know, my English still is kinda crap, but I recall this saying about something to do with boiling frogs. I'm trying to remember. Hey, in comments, help me out with that. So please do not pretend like there is no advantage, even a little bit, by swiping your credit card. So stop lying to yourself, because no one else is buying that act. We all want more fairer, equal games, don't we? And fighting pay to win, even when it's something as small as perhaps an XP booster, is still important, I feel. So yeah, they're paid ship packages. It might not give a massive advantage, hell, maybe it's barely noticeable. However, it does ruin the game in a bigger and smaller way. And most of all, it is designed to be manipulative, to suck out money out of a minority of the player base, and I don't feel that that's correct. Hell, let's say that you don't care about the pay to win or fairness of the game, and you just want to spend $10 to get that advantage. Well then, don't you think that whatever the company is selling you is a pretty bad deal for $10? A shitty ship, a shitty build, and most of all, shitty cosmetics. For $10, you do realize you can get better games. Hell, better expansions. But the sad bottom line with Elite this year really comes down to one thing. they are trying to heavily extract as much money out of last goodwill minority players who might have not thought too hard about what is being sold or how. Sadly, Frontier Developments have chosen not only to sell crappy content rather than putting in genuine effort, but also implement very bad practices, meaning heavy manipulation, in order to do so out of minority of players, in order to support the company, not the game itself. And if you believe in trickle-down economics, well then I have something else to show you. And say what you will, I much rather buy 10 copies of Odyssey than spend a single dollar on a pay-to-win mechanic. At the very least, in Odyssey, as poorly as it was made with some kind of effort and offered actual content and gameplay. But these ship packages and early access, what do they offer? So yeah, there is a reason why I stopped making Elite videos for a while at least. I wanted to see what they would do, and whether or not this gamble of manipulation and disbalancing their game even further would pay off. I am watching, I am following, and once the year rolls around, I will have more to say. But for now, I am observing what would normally been fun and cool moments like new ship releases, with ever more growing concerned expression. And of course, who can forget the garbage microtransactions, like the Low Power Rangers, the eBay Space Marines, Mega Bloks Mobile Infantry. We have Mandalorian at home, Team U Titan, mass-produced effect. Oh god! The Low Fructose Guardians, Mighty Morphin Power Goons, the Concord leftovers. Oh god! No Man's Sky, the game that turned around through sheer diligence and no further shit-talking that got them into trouble in the first place. This is the cartoonish color fest of eye bleach that seems to repel any of those serious space dads with their serious space toys. No Man's Sky, really a very rudimentary game with barely any physics in it, extremely casual and arcadey gameplay, yet through countless content add-ons expanding most of the systems to a point where basically whatever you choose to do these days, you'll have a rather varied gameplay. Now while it's still a space sim light, as I like to call it myself, it's pretty hard to not look at what Hello Games not only have done through the years, but simply how the game itself is running today. Like X4, it's got the good stuff from the live service dumpster fire model, meaning that constant updates and content, but without the bullshit, meaning the always online server needs. From all the games today, No Man's Sky is such a nice example of how you can make a procedural game world and not make it closed off box with invisible walls. Unlike Starfield. Ah, there we go, that's the invisible wall. Or have actual stuff to do on all of the planets, unlike Starfield again. Or the need for servers to generate all the planets or the galaxy, unlike Elite Dangerous. Granted though, that all comes with a cost. See, No Man's Sky doesn't really have a persistent market. Hell, not even a consistent one. Because here's the thing, on the markets in No Man's Sky, if you literally sell anything in big enough quantities, it'll drop the prices of it, the whole stock, meaning that you can sell it at a higher price and buy back at the lowest possible price. Actually, that's one of the big two exploits in the game. That's how rudimentary it is. And when it comes to the spaceship combat, well, forget about it. Even games from 90s have more mechanics in their pinkies than this one. And let's not even attempt to explain whatever the fuck is the FPS combat coding, because I'll get 10 aneurysms deep before I even touch the quality of AI. Still, the game manages to fake a lot of this gameplay mechanic stuff and hide the simplicity enough for you to have fun. And that's what the game succeeds in doing. Because it's not too serious both in style and overall mechanics, what it had to succeed in was just having plenty of it and make it fun, even if it is unbalanced. And that's what No Man's Sky managed. Now, unlike the 3 peers of today, this is the only game that you can truly pick up and play, without sinking 20 minutes to an hour remembering how the fuck to fly or where you left off last time. And of course, sure, you can say that, well, that just sounds like making excuses for shallow gameplay. And yeah, that's kinda true. But you're forgetting I mentioned this word fun. See, it's rather easy to make shallow mechanics to copy what Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous is doing. I mean, look at Spaceborne 2. Oh, and have you ever heard of this thing called copyright infringement also? But to differentiate itself and add actual element of fun is going to require actual planning and effort, which is why every time you hear Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous get criticized, you often hear somebody from the crowd yell out, "No Man's Sky managed to make similar if not better mechanics, while having a fraction of the dev team size." And that's thanks to the fact that those simplified mechanics are actually more fun or easier to use. Now, all that's really nice and all, but where does No Man's Sky shine the most? Well, as it happens, at least to my account, there are two things, in fact. Base building and exploration type gameplay. So, first off, base building. Now, as much as I personally hate it and would never go beyond just a shit shack and a goddamn storage bin, granted, only X4 does some kind of base building mechanics as well, but it's space-based, and even then it's kinda simplistic in comparison. While on the other hand, No Man's Sky itself competes already with more dedicated survival crafting games. Although when you remember one of your biggest competitors is Ark Survival, it's not saying much. But even if I despise building games with passion, I still recognize the good mechanics that No Man's Sky has, and the variety of it. But as we move on to exploration now, this is where No Man's Sky is holding its trump card for the space sim genre as a whole. While Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen have moved the whole genre forward massively, No Man's Sky has contributed its own important addition, and that's showing how on-foot exploration should be done. Like I mentioned with Elite Dangerous, it takes the space exploration further than anyone has before in a cool, very appealing way. However, on foot, planet-side gameplay, well, that's where No Man's Sky is the game, to show how exploration should be done right. Scanning rocks, creatures, finding power source locations, or simply being a very useful navigation tool along with bestiary and encyclopedia. To date, no one has beaten the depth in which this little cartoony space game has moved exploration, and for that we must thank it for its efforts. I mean, no wonder Starfield couldn't resist copying a few features it had, and why not? A good idea is a good idea. Copy and iterate on it. Oh, and because I know somebody in the comments will mention this, but No Man's Sky also has the biggest amount of gameplay styles and types, none of the other ones come close, even if they're shallow and fakey fake. And to that, well, maybe it beats Elite, but it's kind of hard thing to measure really, and I much rather prefer to go quality over quantity at some point. But hey, let's have fight in the comments. Which is better, to have more types of gameplay or more quality of it? And hey, maybe let me know which one of the today's quartet space sims actually have more gameplay types. As for this year's accomplishment and future content and plans, well, first off, Hello Games is the exact opposite of Star Citizen. Instead of blabbering on and on about pointless, meaningless details, half of which gets scrapped or moved and delayed later, Hello Games developers say absolutely nothing and accomplish a lot. Yeah, that's right, Star Citizen fans, fight me! Seriously though, the only future detail that we know of Hello Games is basically their next game, The Light No Fire, a single planet fantasy survival crafter like Rust, Ark and all the other bunch. That one's coming. Regardless, when it's releasing or what the full details are of it, no one knows. Now, unlike No Man's Sky's release, this time developers seems to be keeping it close to their chests after seemingly learning their lessons, and that's a good thing. Though remember, no pre-orders, please! Now, as for the stuff that has been accomplished these past 12 years, well, let's go down the list, starting with the Omega update. For the very first time, the game went free to play just for a weekend, with additionally introducing Expedition with a cool unique ship reward and ability to capture Pirate Dreadnought as your capital ship. After that, Orbital Update later changed up the space stations and their visuals, and more importantly, gave you the ability to make your own fully custom ship. So no longer you need to really hunt for the S-tier ships that look cool or do things. Just scrap a few and throw together your favorite shape and color it the way you like it. That update particularly felt larger than it actually was, not in a bad way of course. Between this and the next update, you also have another expedition, Adrift, which offers another cool unique ship as a reward. But then came time for the biggest update of the year, in fact in a few years. Worlds Part 1. On the first glance, it didn't seem to do much different from all the other updates before it. However, once you start listing all the things they changed, several noticeable graphics updates, water effect change that genuinely looks like Sea of Thieves, well, slightly lesser than it, but still, a few new creatures including the space bugs that allows you to recreate Helldivers, and if like me you are living in Latvia or other places where you cannot get the fucking PSN account, thanks Sonny for the fucking PSN account bullshit. I want to give you money for Ghost of Tsushima, but oh no, you don't want it? Oh, do I have to pirate the fucking game? Oh well, don't mind if I do. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, right. Worlds Part 1. It does compound into something much larger than just few changes. Now, you could say that this could just be the last big push for the game before Light No Fire releases, but honestly, who knows? But anyways, the next update, instead of being Worlds Part 2 releasing, a small little fishing update, Aquarius dropped with a small expedition. And that's it for now, at least. This is No Man's Sky, at least as of making. Well, regardless, whether the Worlds Part 2 releases this year or the next one, we can be certain of a few things about No Man's Sky. There are still plenty of things to do, both old and new. And so, in the light of a lot of crappy content being shoved out for these live service games, both X4 and No Man's Sky have been a delightful bright spot in the dark, so that I can point to them and say, see, they can afford to be customer friendly and offer actual content and effort, so why can't you? Yes, both of you. And of course all the other ones, Alright then, after all that, it's time to compare and contrast and suck all the joy out of enjoying your chosen space sim, as the comparison is the thief of joy. Now, let's state the obvious. None of the four are perfect, nor will they ever be. No matter how much Star Citizen fanboys keep telling everyone that, you know, it's the ultimate game, just wait for the next update. Please, don't judge, it's all fun. Okay, I'm being a bit too snarky, but you get the point. So, how about we give someone else a chance to express their love for today's quartet before the mean old Yamiks comes and crashes the party. Dig, take it away.
It's a beautiful thing that we have as many robust space games to talk about these days. Elite Dangerous created a reawakening of the genre and gave the sci-fi nerds a deeper well to drink from after years of just running around an environment shooting things. Now there's a little something for everybody. X4, which if you just see the trailers and artwork, you think was another ship shooter, but that conceals what's effectively a massive macroeconomic empire building sim. Definitely not gonna put a dance in everybody's step, but for the gamer that likes to sit super slumped down in the chair, it's a solid way to stretch those strategic muscles and devise ways to spread oppression through the galaxy. But it seems like a detached experience. Once you're up and running, you can just stand in an elevator and direct all your resources from there like a stay-at-home employee version of Fidel Castro. Kinda makes you wonder why they attached the first-person aspect to the game at all. Personally, I'm glad they did, because as thin as the experience is, it connects you to the universe as a person who exists in it rather than just a god perspective city comptroller. They say that the graphics don't make the games, and this is true. And it's a good thing, because visually, it's not the bee's knees. Can't put my finger on exactly what it is. Has a decent amount of detail. Maybe it's the textures. And decent is about the best you can say about it visually. Anywho, No Man's Sky continues to impress. Blah, 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 rocky start in the beginning, but at this point, who cares? Hello Games being free from the whip of the always hungry shareholders is leaving them unfettered to show the industry how it can be done. Free expansion after free expansion, and we're not just talking about fluff updates, new ships and biome types, mounts you can saddle up on, VR compatibility, base building. The game is 8 years old, and they just dropped a huge visual overhaul with new environmental tech, including wave and foam generation for the water, which looks beautimous now. They deserve a place next to CD Projekt Red for esteemed developers. I love what they do from a development perspective. As a player, it's not for me in terms of what I'm looking for in a space game in the same way that X4 isn't either. I love watching my buddy stream it, but being a faceless character bobbing through a cartoonish wilderness detaches the identity from the player, so it's almost like you're just playing a spacesuit that's addicted to collecting the ingredients. Anybody can see No Man's Sky is a solid, well-executed game that's giving the people what they want. A lot of places to visit and take in some candy-coated, highly saturated visuals, several crafts to do it with, things to work toward. But without the lust to spend hours and hours collecting things, it's hard for one to get engaged. What changes all that is when you throw on a VR headset, or as TheYamiks calls it, the privilege goggles. That's when it becomes a real experience that you're grounded in. Suddenly, you're not the walking spacesuit. You're you, and the immersion begins. You're collecting whatever you need for the next ship or base or whatever, not because No Man's Sky is where you spend your time, so you might as well be crafting something. In VR, you do it because it's something you can build and put your hands on or get inside of in this universe that you're physically in. Flat No Man's Sky ain't got enough lemon pepper and garlic powder to season up a full meal, but No Man's Sky in VR is a feast that'll have you burping. Elite Dangerous. That's what I cut my space game teeth on. It's what you point out when somebody's ready to try their first space in. Oh, the wonders of hopping in a ship with complicated controls to master and making your first wobbly ass takeoff from the landing pad, becoming confident enough to venture out to your first haz-res, or getting your ship suited and booted up to fly a passenger somewhere and catching that feeling of aloneness as you cruise through the vacuum of space. It's nothing quite like it. Then you begin your career as a commander, doing everything from mining, trading, bounty hunting, and hopping out into deep space for exploration. After you rank up though, and you've seen everything, and you start to notice that every star system has the same planets, and you've engineered all your ships, you fought the Thargoids 1,050 times, and you're all bloated and fat from your fleet carrier profits, you start to look around like, so now what? And that's the hardest question to answer in Elite Dangerous. Elite is great at providing that experience that gives you the awe of being a space pilot and then gives you things to accomplish, but unlike No Man's Sky, at some point you accomplish it all with nothing new to look forward to. There's nothing to do but speculate at what could possibly happen sometime in the future, which is a shame because what's in the game works well. The ship combat's good, except when you get two over-engineered players floating stationary just firing weapons at each other in a DPS race. The exploration mechanics are top-notch. Laser mining is brainless, but core mining is sufficiently complex with some stakes for errors made. Hell, even occasionally running to a ground base and stealing their power supply is good for a change of pace every now and then. But there's been no expansion on these loops. What was once the mighty face of space gaming now continues to sit in a stagnating pond. What kind of makes it worse are these dev updates promising that something is in the works. We heard that for years, going all the way back to the Kickstarter days. Folks like to say at least Elite is a finished game, which doesn't really help it, but Elite Dangerous is not complete, or it is complete by virtue of having given up. The more interesting things that were supposed to be in the game never materialized, so either they gave up and called it a finished game, or it's incomplete. Either way, don't look good. Now, if they pull a rabbit out they had and finish developing what was promised back then, Elite will be back in the saddle as a go-to game. Prime is a capital to do that is hard to come by. Folks complain about them monetizing ships when really they should have been monetizing more aggressively years ago so that they wouldn't be in this pickle. 4 new ships over the course of a year is progress, but still a small rabbit with very little meat on it. Maybe with a little luck, it'll do the trick and give it enough steam to put the live back in this live service game. Also, Raxxla doesn't exist. What? Star Citizen. Talk about a game you either get or you don't. It's not one of those ones where you slowly get addicted as you go. It's either, oh my God, or it's, oh my God. Now, the positive OMG is for all the reasons we talked about earlier. It's big, it's boundary pushing, it allows for experiences that other devs can't do because they got shareholders to feed quickly or don't have the budget and manpower. The negative OMG can either be you jump in and find that you just don't have the stomach for a game in alpha development, or it could be that there's a good deal of sim in this space sim. For example, a few years ago, while another content creator was on stream with me, we walked into a ship hangar so we could leave, and he was like, "Where's a portal to teleport me into the ship?" The rest of us laughed, but he was dead serious. Now everybody wants to open up a ship's ramp, walk in, close it, walk to the bridge. In Star Citizen, it's not as deep as running the 15-minute startup sequence before taking off, but there is a lot of simulating the experience in other areas like loading, offloading, physicalized cargo, boarding a derelict ship and yanking the components and weapons out of it and then carrying it back to your ship, eating, drinking, monitoring your vitals. Down the road, we'll be recruiting, assigning roles and stations to, and monitoring the progress of NPC crew. In the next 6 months or sooner, we'll be managing ship resources that feed not only the ship's engines and weapons, but the life support system, and monitoring planet temperatures so that insanely hot planets don't ignite a fire inside a cargo bay because the ramp was left open. The type of gamer that just wants to teleport into their ship ain't gonna stick around to deal with all that, so OMG it is. From a is it any good perspective, does what I described sound like the type of game you're interested in? If yeah, then it's definitely good. If not, nah, you probably won't dig it. Is the execution of what they're after good? It's incredible. With some caveats, it's in active development, so anytime you put in code on top of code, the bugs will breed. Can definitely put you in some frustrating moments, but then they end up fixed as they go. There's an ongoing dialogue between the devs and the players, so bugs get reported and looked into regularly. Feedback is considered and implemented if it makes sense and aligns with the goals. You can't please everybody, and it's a waste of time to try it, but the devs are present enough to at least consider what the players are feeding back. The development has been an insanely long process, but the tech and features being created are worth it, especially if you enjoy having new content every quarter. It's like consistently getting Amazon deliveries every 3 months or so.
Alright, then I guess it's my time to do some jabbing, I guess. Let's start with X4. While it does excel in trading simulation, it lacks pretty much in all other aspects of being a competent game with comfortable and usable control. The reason I don't play it as much is mainly due to bad control scheme. And no, I'm not just talking about the key bindings here, absolutely not. And also there is the UI, which is just boring and immersion breaking that it obscures the actually pretty models that artists have created. Seriously, just take a look at the ships without the UI polluting the screen. I dare you. And still, among today's 4 games, if trading and building out your empire while still piloting a spaceship at some occasions is your kind of a jam, well, X4 really does hit the spot, and there's no denying that. As for Elite Dangerous, well, the game that this hypercritical Latvian deems as the best space sim, well, it is, as sad as that might turn out to be. I say that because it's deeply unbalanced and plagued by lazy game design that leaves the game resulting in empty planets and boatloads of grinding. Yet even so, that experience of literal immersion, feeling like you're there piloting a spaceship, is still unparalleled. Sure, Star Citizen might beat it, but when? When will that happen? Cause right now, the fucking thing is as unstable as one like giraffe and filled with more bugs than a cracker rolling in a cockroach pit and much more. Yes, it is possible that it could finally beat Elite, but if you want to actually play a game with actual gameplay, Elite is finished. The game loops are done, and as much as I criticize them, it is the most finished one of the bunch, with the most solid grasp on all the gameplay aspects, most of all, combat and of course that immersion feeling. And then of course we have the No Man's Sky, and I can't tell you how many stuck-up space dads have told me, don't play it cause it's a kid's game for children, while gripping their $1,000 immersion sticks for their real games. Now granted, colors and arcadey, more often than not static and rather faked gameplay, aping what the other 3 are trying to do is noticeable, but where No Man's Sky excels is being that entry, that lighter, no pressure environment where tryharding, like in the real space, is not as important to succeed, and that's a good thing to have. Still, there is no denying that No Man's Sky, even though being this more arcadey, simplistic game, has accomplished the most this year, adding more content and overall fun gameplay than all the other ones. Again, despite what the Star Citizen faithful keeps spewing. And speaking of that, Star Citizen got more delays this year for the 4.0 and the server meshing thing, while reworking a few other systems, like for example the UI, that frankly speaking should have been designed and planned from the very beginning. Much like the combat mechanics and everything around it, but hey, we have master modes now and it's being tested for what, more than a year now? Fun that. Still, the actual progress in the grand scale of becoming a finished product is really slow and painful to look at least for me. And seriously, no one cares about the hair or character creator as much as they think. It really does very little to help Star Citizen become a full game. Overall, Star Citizen has been a rather big letdown on its own this year, and surprisingly so, I'm not the only creator saying it anymore. Now sure, I do like the new star system map and the fact that it's not broken anymore, but why the fuck was it broken in the first place? See, shit like that does not score points in my book, and minor additions of wildlife or even more ships does very little to mask the shit frame rate, performance, and finished state of the core mechanics like physics, networking, graphics, optimization, and more. In serious, grand scale, there's little to no difference from the last year, and it keeps pissing me off. How long can CIG keep their devoted fan base and take them for a ride without accomplishing what they promised over 10 years ago. That's what really irks me. Then, as we glance back at X4, it just chugs along slowly. While this year it did poop out the least liked DLC, there's really nothing particularly negative to say about it. Well, aside from the slow progress and lack of content, but then it's really no different from other years either. So, in a typical German engineering, this clock keeps on ticking. And you know, same could be said about Elite. Near stagnation would be the key phrase of the year for it, even with the Targoid mothership explosions. However, thanks to the new ships and few minor changes for engineering and power play coming soon, it could spell generally positive vibes all around. If they hadn't dipped further into pay to win and used FOMO tactics to manipulate its customers. And yeah, of course, if we are dipping into whataboutism, then yeah, sure, Star Citizen is far more FOMO driven and pay to win infested. But this year, Cloud Imperium kinda stayed on its lawful evil designation per usual. No change, while Elite took a drastic turn, which does hurt a lot more, and it's just sad to see. So then, in the end, what do you think? Which one was the best one this year? Which one accomplished the most? Which one was the victorious one? Do let me know down below in the comments. But if you ask me, and you're watching this so you're implicitly asking, No Man's Sky is a very clear winner this time around. Nothing but good or great additions to the game, further expanding the gameplay in a meaningful manner. But hey, that's just me, the cynic in the crowd. So, Dig, what about you?
I gotta give it up to No Man's Sky. I say that because they did the most with the least. Every time you think their small team has nothing left to bring to the field, they knock out a home run with some well thought out content that elevates the game. Their fan base rapidly consumes it, and folks on the sidelines like me are always ready to watch. They out there winning hearts and minds. Star Citizen is bringing innovative, never been done before packages to the verse, and even though the player base is huge and consistently getting bigger every day, it's a difficult process for some players to endure. All these years of bringing something unique to the industry while developing 2 games in parallel will pay off a little further down the road, but for now, it's beautifully messy. X4 is delivering the people what they want, but such a niche game, I can't really see a situation where it would be the game out of them all.
Alright then, that's about it then. Remember to toss a dead horse on my Patreon for my sustenance, and I'll see you then next time. Oh, and of course, big thanks to Dig That for coming along and giving his lowdown on Star Citizen and other things, of course. And if you want to hear more of his golden voice, well, go check out his stuff down below. There'll be a link.